What's up, guys? Today, I figured we need to have a little talk about power. So, I've talked about a lot of these different aspects in different videos. So if you guys want any clarity, you can look through my playlist and find tons of information based on the subject that I'm going to start this with today. However, I want to touch on a couple of things that I don't know if I mentioned in the past. So, first of all, let's say you want to have 14.4, 14.5 volts in your car audio system. Well, to do that, you need to have storage that's capable of resting at 14.4 or volts. So, for example, like in my system, I have a 14.4, actually it's close to 15 volt alternator. And that's my one wire alternator, it's 370 amp. I have another alternator that charges at a range between 13.5 and 14.5 volts based on the computer and the Tahoe telling it how much to charge. You guys with, mid 2000s Chevy pickups and whatnot, you know what I'm talking about. So I have that. And then my battery system is 12 volts. My batteries want to rest at 12 volts, 12.5, whatever. And then I have a super cap. The super cap will rest anywhere between like 5 volts and 17 volts or 16 volts. It does not care. So what does that mean? I like to think I've got a fairly similar system to a lot of people. What that means is, for however many amps I can get out of my alternators, which in theory is 670 amps with the pedal pushed down and the idle up just right. In theory, pardon me. In theory, I can get 670 amps out of that. But of course, you're going to find the end of that, because I've got an 8,000 watt amplifier. And for every 1,000 watts of amplifier, you need 100 amps of power. Okay? So I need 800 amps of power to power that amplifier when it's running full tilt. And it does run full tilt on a regular basis because I'm a psycho basshead. Well, what this means is I'm going to be able to maintain 14.4 volts until I'm asking for 800 amps. Once that happens, now I'm going to be looking for power from the batteries and the capacitor, of course. But ultimately, the capacitor is going to be resting with the batteries too, so it's going to be the same voltage. And once that voltage drops, I'm needing more power from the alternator. Now I'm pulling power from the batteries. That means my voltage is going to settle down to low 12s, low to mid 12s, because now the batteries won't start actually producing power until I get to that point. Now the capacitor is a nice go-between between the alternator and the battery, because the capacitor, while the vehicle is running, will charge up to 14.5 volts. So it's going to buffer the alternator, right? The amps are getting power from it, but as that power starts to decrease in the capacitor, it starts pulling power from the batteries. But ultimately, when you get down to the bottom, you're now at all the batteries, capacitor, and the alternator all trying to keep up. And if you're already pulling more power than your alternator can actually provide, you eventually are going to run out of power. However, there's a lot of storage in AGMs. And I've got 3 AGMs, so they can sit there and provide that power for quite a while. Now here's the thing, if you're wanting to stay at 14.4 volts, your storage needs to be 14.4 volt storage. That way, when you immediately start pulling power from the system, the batteries that are storing that power, or whatever they are, will be able to immediately provide power. And that will help you maintain that voltage. If you're running 12 volt batteries, you're not going to stay at 14.5 volts unless you have more than enough alternator to literally 100% plus provides you with the power you need for your amplifier. It just doesn't work that way. So now the question is this. You understand, if you're running a 12-volt batteries and you're running an alternator that charges or whatever, it doesn't matter, you're always going to drop into the 12s whenever you're jamming. It's just going to happen. There's no way around that. So if you want to be higher, you need bigger storage. Storage with 14-volt storage. So the next question is, why do we even want to stay in the 14s? What is the point in that? And that's simple, actually. Voltage times amps equals watts. So the higher your voltage is, the less amperage you have to equal your watts. And the voltage is the multiplier. Okay, that's the key multiplier. Think about it. You're only looking at 12 volts and thousands of watts. So every volt you add is a huge amount of power because that's the multiplier. Make sense? Okay. Now, having that figured out, how much difference does it make? You see, there's two types of amplifiers, quote unquote. There's not very many high current amplifiers on the market anymore. But back in the day, they would have two types. There's a high power and a high current, or a high voltage and a high current. The high voltage setup was, as you would think, high 15, 16, 17 volts. The high current was usually set up for 12 or 13 volts with tons of current to provide. And since nobody had the current back in the day when they were doing that, it didn't stick around very long. We still have a few out there, but for the most part, we're always looking at voltage. So that's one reason. One reason why is voltage gives you the multiplier to help you not use as much current, which means more bass. Another reason is most equipment is set up to where it doesn't like to be run at below 12 volts. This is traditional. So you kind of freak out if the voltage drops below 12, down into the 11s or down into the 10s, because a lot of equipment just won't run at lower than a certain voltage. Well, today in modern world, we actually have most of the equipment out there is set to run between 9 and 15 or 16 volts. It's a pretty wide window, especially considering the stop-start technology, which is becoming more and more of a thing. A lot of the equipment has to be capable of running at like 8 or 9 volts, because whenever you take off, that start-stop thing kicks in and you start up, your voltage will drop. And what would happen is every time you get to a red light and you go to leave, your voltage would drop and your stereo would turn off and turn back on again. That wouldn't be very good. And so what this means is that most of the newer, better equipment is being equipped to where it can operate at lower voltages, have a bigger range on its power supply. So that's not as big of a deal, but it still is a deal because not everybody's running the best stuff out there. And most of your amplifiers will turn off at like 10 volts, just shut off. And the other thing is, this is a big one. When you lower that voltage, you have to pull more amps. And so what happens is, as the voltage goes down, the amplifier is still trying to make its power. So it'll pull more amperage. When you pull more amperage, you're introducing more heat into that system. So running low voltage, higher amperage can accelerate the finite lifespan of your amplifier. So you can start generating tons of heat and it'll shut off because it gets too hot, or it just keeps taking it and it just lives a shorter life, or it just dies very quickly, or it catches on fire. Who knows? The point is, running high voltage is better for your equipment. It doesn't generate as much heat, and it's easier on the whole system. That's another reason why you'd want to have higher voltage. Ultimately, It comes down to this though. If you want to run 14.5 volts, you've got to have 14.5 volt batteries, lithium or AGMs or whatever. Your voltage needs to be, the resting voltage of the storage needs to be in that range that you're trying to get to, or you're not going to be able to maintain. You're not going to be able to maintain 14.5 volts unless you're pulling way less power than your alternator's charging. Like right now, I'm on a 12 volt system with 14.5, 15 volt charging. As long as I've got I'm not really giving it the full plate of beans. Like for example, I'm playing, 75% volume, heavy bass, but not crazy hard hitting stuff. My voltage will stay up in the high 14s all day long. But if I ever ask it to give me 100% of that amplifier, it'll start dropping. It'll drop down to about 12.3 or 12.4, and then it'll stabilize, and it won't drop any further than that. But that's because I'm getting into the batteries, not just on the alternator. Make sense? I hope so. Anyway, I know this is kind of a discussion style video, not really a goal directed thing. I just wanted to touch on a few points that I just thought maybe a lot of folks weren't really aware of or weren't in the right frame of mind on. Hopefully some of this will help you to make a decision on whether to try to push yourself into the 14.5 volt crowd and what you'll have to do to accomplish that, and also whether or not you need to. So thanks a lot for you guys for helping me out. And I want to do a shout out for Living Loud with Andy, because this topic came from a discussion I saw on his live program. Someone asked a question about electrical systems, and I thought, you know what, that's a great topic. So that's where you guys got this topic from. And check out Living Loud with Andy. Get his weekly podcast on Tuesdays and Fridays. It's a great time. Anyway, for now, guys, peace.